Hi guys, I'm Mike.
And I'm Stephen.
And this is F1 Fanatics. Welcome back to another race review podcast. Silverstone Race 1 happened at the weekend and we are here now after the dust has settled to kind of go through every team and review their weekend, also throwing in a feeder roundup as well before saying who our driver of the day was and what we gave the race rating as. So make sure you kind of hang around through the video to check out those. With the driver ratings video out yesterday that we did with Tinnis, make sure you kind of go and check that out as well. And we're introducing again back into using timestamps. So if you are kind of looking for a particular team, we'll leave that in the description down below, that you will know the time that we start talking about a particular team. But race on Sunday, it was... it seemed like a bit of a dull affair and then just went mental.
The start was like, oh yeah, midfield action. Renault's, McLaren's fighting each other. Oh, first safety car, Albon Magnussen, bit of drama, bit of controversy. Kvyat just flies off. Tyler was like, nah, I don't want to race today.
No.
Maybe his tyres, maybe Kvyat lost it. And then second safety car, and everyone went, yeah, let's pit. Let's everyone pit. Let's everyone go on the same tyres, and that's the race. Strategy? No, don't need that. We'll do the same thing. That's the race. 40 laps later, oh yeah, it's just driving home. Here's the results. It's been like this for the last hour. And bam! The tyres are like, no! This race is going to be exciting! And so we're just going to destroy ourselves. Hamilton, Bottas, Sainz, Verstappen feeling vibrations.
We take a time to remember all tyres' lives that were lost on Sunday's race. Your sacrifice to give us good racing or an exciting end to a Grand Prix is noted.
Yeah.
But mental, yes, absolutely. It was like, good start. No. It's probably the best way to describe it in terms of noise.
Yeah.
But onto the teams and jumping into Williams first up. So Stephen, Williams weekend.
Williams, race pace, looking much, much better. Obviously, Hungary, it was terrible. Latifi was like 3 laps down. George was a lap down, or maybe not quite a lap down, but no, he must be. But yes, 12th and 15th for George Russell and Latifi. Very impressive from George to get P12, and solid from Latifi to also... They're not the slowest car on the grid anymore. I think it's fair to say. That Alfa, I know Gio beat Latifi, but Williams are looking better race pace than Alfa.
Yeah, it looks like it's made a step forward, hasn't it?
Even the Haas of Roman Grosjean as well. So yeah,
absolutely. I mean, Grosjean was one of those guys who has decided to go against the grain strategy. It proved that it was the right decision actually to pit everyone at the same time. It would appear, because you then just end up P16. But yeah, we wouldn't have known otherwise actually, because
he added a bit of drama, didn't he?
It's certainly.
We'll come on to that when we cover Haas.
We certainly will. But I thought it was a positive weekend for Williams in their home Grand Prix.
Yeah.
And again, George getting into Q2 on merit is another positive for the team.
Yeah.
That qualifying pace definitely is there, and the race pace looked closer to qualifying pace. Obviously benefited a bit from retirements as well, and tyre blowouts, but
for George to finish above both the Alfa Romeos,
it was impressive.
Yeah,
because that was on merit.
We're going to have to start starting with Alfa now.
Oh God, we are. In terms of it, but that moves us on to Alfa. A good weekend for Williams. For Alfa, it's so bad how everything is at the moment, and for Kimi Räikkönen, it's horrible watching someone who is one of the most naturally talented guys to race in F1 since the turn of the century. Like, this guy, I think it gets forgotten how good a driver he was. And he's just been fizzling on this trajectory. And I don't know if you could say arguably it's been since he joined Ferrari. Because he accepted that number 2 role to Fernando, and he accepted that number 2 role for Sebastian, and was just there to support. But it just feels there and now with Alfa Romeo, the car being so bad, it's sad to see a former world champion finish dead last in a Grand Prix.
Yeah, again, being by his teammate, young Antonio Giovinazzi, who, I don't know, okay, P14, not saying the world alight, but,
It's difficult.
He didn't make any mistakes. Gio with Silverstone has tended to make mistakes.
Yeah, that is true. He made a mistake quite a lot in practice, actually, I think, didn't he?
Obviously, last year he went off.
In Vale, I think it was.
Yeah.
Going from there. But, it's hard for both of them, because Kimi Raikkonen wants to enjoy racing, he wants to help develop Alfa, but clearly just things are wrong, I don't know, budget-wise or whatever. I mean, the Ferrari power unit hasn't helped.
Yeah.
But even if the Ferrari power unit was good, they still don't have a great car.
Exactly.
I don't think, because you can just look at where Haas are in terms of race pace with Kevin Magnussen, and Charles has still managed to get on podiums on that regard. So the Ferrari power unit isn't horrendously bad. It's the worst, but it's not like off the scales bad. But it's sad for both of them, because Giovinazzi needed a big season to prove that he's worth to stay in F1, and it's difficult to do that in a failing car. And Kimi Raikkonen wants to enjoy racing and prove that he's still got it and can be competitive in that midfield and go out on a high, but it's not happening.
No, and with the promising Ferrari Academy drivers all doing very well in F2, you got to think maybe this is the last season for Kimi and possibly the last season for Gio.
Possibly, in terms of that, and it'd be a mix-up, and that team, it is difficult. It is really difficult for Alfa Romeo, and they will be desperately hoping that they can do something in 2022 just to be competitive again, because these next 2 years just seem a bit of a write-off.
Yeah.
But Haas,
yes. Well, no, not a yes, a no. Kevin Magnussen had a great start, overtook Alexander Albon.
He overtook a few people, started P16, didn't he?
Yep, and was in
P12, I think.
P12. Made a little mistake exiting Vale, and then left the door open for Albon, who was desperately trying to get his position back. And Albon made the move you probably shouldn't. You shouldn't. Not probably. You shouldn't make a move there. Kevin Magnussen, the victim, and went out. So, great potential, never utilised.
Materialised. I think that's the word we're going for. Never materialised.
Yes.
I think it's probably quite a good point, actually, so that when we get onto Alex Albon, we can actually talk about the positives of his race, to talk about that instant, and it's there. And it's a mix. It's one that causes debate. Is it a racing incident? Is it not? When gaps are open, should drivers be aggressive and go for things? But my point on the incident is, yes, there is a mistake from Kevin Magnussen. Yes, it leaves the door open. But it was a gap that was always closing. And with Alexander Albon, he's punted a guy out of the race because he's caused an avoidable accident. And, that corner, you just don't see people overtake there. That's the line-up corner. You make sure, and what would have happened is, because of where Kevin Magnussen made the mistake, he wouldn't have been accelerating out that corner, as well. He would have been slower to get up to full throttle, and Alex Albon would have had the car advantage anyway. So all he needed to do was go slot in behind, take a normal line, with the mistake, rather than trying to cut in, narrow the line, that he compromised his exit out of turn one. So I don't know if that was maybe part of the problem, because he then kind of turned, didn't he, to get the inside of Kevin as Kevin was wide out here.
Yeah.
Where if he had just gone the normal line, Kevin's gone there, slipstreamed it, bang, out of turn one, it would have been an easy overtake, and we wouldn't have even spoken about it. Kevin Magnussen could have gone about his race. We could have seen where that Haas might have been with him, because he's the capable driver out of the two at the moment. I'm sure we'll talk about Roman Grosjean in a second. But yeah, it was just a silly move, and it's a shame, that Kevin loses his thing, and it's a shame because Albon's race was just compromised from that point onwards, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's another frustrating one, because if Alex just had that little bit more patience, especially with a car of Haas, one of the probably third slowest car on the grid, if that was a Lewis Hamilton and Bottas, Max, if there's a gap, you're not going to get many gaps, and maybe, fair enough, go for it. When it's Kevin Magnussen, and you're going to have opportunities every single lap, just wait for a safe one.
I think context is everything in that incident, in terms of you've got a far superior car to the Haas car. It's lap one. Yes, you've not had the ideal start, and that's frustrated you because you've had a poor qualifying the day before. But good drivers don't let that get in their head. They just make the move, and they line up the move, bang, make it easy. You don't. That was always, at best, a 50-50 percentage chance of success. Good drivers usually kind of get in that 70% bracket, unless obviously it's going for a podium position or a late position, and desperate for that, which he isn't fighting for at the moment. But Roman Grosjean.
Roman Grosjean. Is he one of the heads of the Driver Association?
Yes.
Yes. I don't think he's going to be very popular in the next meeting.
No.
Very dangerous driving. Is that fair to say? Dangerous driving. Basically, we touched on it earlier. Haas left Grosjean out, so he was running in P5, quicker tyres but slower car. So he had Sainz, Norris and Ricciardo all behind him, all in faster cars, all making moves on him. But Grosjean didn't want to give up those positions. No. He was putting in some defensive displays that could have taken out 3 drivers in separate instance. Basically, going down, what's the straight? Hangar Straight?
Yeah, Hangar Straight.
That's where both the McLaren boys went. They were going for the inside. Grosjean was taking the outside line, but every time he just went zoom.
And
right as they were coming really close, so no margin for error. It could have so easily high-speed crash.
And that's why it's dangerous. And this is why I'm actually surprised by the stewards that they didn't do anything. Because I think in the rules in it, obviously it's racing, for position. You got to fight. You've got to go from. It's drivers. You've got to understand the battle. I use the example of, when we see high speed crashes. I think Mark Webber's was the most recent one. When it's high speed and a car jags across and you go there, that's when you get cars going airborne and flying. I mean, obviously safety has come miles on from that point, but I go back to 1982 with Gilles Villeneuve. But yes, obviously the ground effect was something a little bit more with a massive change in downforce, kind of breaking the seal on the car. But they both went the same way, bang over the top, flew out the car, and it could have been a very serious accident. And it's joking aside with Roman Grosjean. I've been a big defender of him. He's a talented guy, and the talent's not there. But he seems like he's in the same position with Kimi Raikkonen, where their motivation and just ability of engaging in a race weekend seems at an all-time low. Kimi's at the tail end of his career. Grosjean is at the tail end of his career now. Or, this is the stage of his career where he looks around the guys similar age to him and they're competing at the front of the grid for points and positions there. And Haas just is nowhere near that. It's still a project.
Yeah.
And I think he's lost motivation in the project. And it means that he's just really being careless in terms of he's not racing at the intensity that he needs to. And when you do that and your intensity's not up there, you're just going to leave yourself open for criticism. And yeah, it was a really poor weekend for Roman Grosjean. And for those who were like, he should have been gone last year, he's not really providing any proof to kind of say otherwise at the moment.
I just remember the other incident with Max in practice, wasn't it, as well? Where you go on Max's way. Yeah, Roman Grosjean. It was on signs. I think Norris managed to make the move before Grosjean could take him out.
And Ricciardo.
And Ricciardo as well. Yeah, not great.
Not a great day at the office for Roman. But Alfa Tauri. Well, their main problem at the moment seems to be getting two cars to finish a Grand Prix. If it's not Gasly's engine blowing up, it's Kvyat's tyres blowing up.
Yeah.
Because wasn't it Austria Race 1 that it was Ocon gave in a puncture?
Yes.
And went off after turn 1. And in this race, it appeared the data said that he just lost pressure in a tyre. So I don't know whether it was a slow puncture or it was just something that kind of happened on that front. But yeah, he went and had quite a nasty crash. And it was good to see him. And it's credit actually to F1 safety. Because that was a big hit.
Yeah, high speed, yeah.
Yeah, and he did take a little bit too much curb. I think Cranky Yankee was doing like some comparison in onboard footage, but still, like the pressure, it does appear like it was a tyre, and when that, you're just kind of a passenger, and amazing over now. But Pierre Gasly, on the other hand, his car or engine seems to have been able to get him to the end of this Grand Prix. And he had a fantastic race. He just managed to his tyres seemed to have a lot more life. I don't know if he just looked after them better throughout the race. Made his way up through the field, got past Sebastian Vettel, kept Alexander Albon behind him for the majority of the race, who was on fresher tyres for the majority of the time that he was behind him. And, that's the main car. And that was incredibly impressive, the pace and defensive ability that he was showing. Got past Vettel late on in the race, got past the racing point of Lance Stroll in a fantastic and how you should overtake. Like, if you want the prime example of difference and maybe where Gasly's matured, because obviously a big criticism of Gasly and Red Bull is he didn't make overtakes. Alex Albon, my criticism at Red Bull is he makes too aggressive overtakes where he just kind of expects people to move and it doesn't go there. But, I think Stroll locked up into Vale. He then followed him round, got great traction out of the final corner, tailed him, and then it was an easy overtake into turn 1. Stroll didn't even fight it.
No.
Because it was that easy. And it was a brilliant race from the young French driver.
Yeah. He was one of the ones that brought excitement towards the end in on-track action.
Definitely.
Yes, so that's AlphaTauri. Moving on to Renault, who Esteban Ocon, best race of the season so far?
Absolutely.
With a P7, P6?
P6.
That's a very good result, actually. Yes, Esteban Ocon still pretty far behind Ricciardo, but looking good. Obviously, Ricciardo's an incredible driver. He's probably, and Esteban's been out the sport for 2 years, so we're not expecting him to immediately be beating Ricciardo, but he still needs to close that gap a little bit. Ricciardo, though, P4, fantastic result for Renault. To be fair, P4 and P6, overall team, great result. Ricciardo, got stuck a bit in the DRS train, which was the lull of the race. Got stuck behind Grosjean. He was picking up DRS from Lando, and but he made the move on Lando late on, and then obviously benefited off Sainz getting his puncture and P4. Great result, great drive, and he made his tyres last and benefited.
And that was the tyre was the main difference, because obviously, you know, between McLaren and Renault, it's the engines are the same, so it's always going to be difficult. You know, the main overtakings at Silverstone is getting slipstreaming in that, but it is difficult when to have that power advantage over someone, because you know they've got the same power units.
Yeah,
essentially. Going on that front, but it was just a very well managed race from Daniel Ricciardo, and you know, put himself in a position, made the move on Norris late on, probably wouldn't have had enough time to make the move on Carlos Sainz as well, but it would have been an interesting last lap, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think he was actually going quicker than Leclerc at the end.
Was he?
So yeah, I think they were saying there was like another 5 laps. Ricciardo may have actually got a podium, but obviously there was another 5 laps, everyone would be pitting and whatnot. It'd be even more chaotic. But yes, good pace from Renault, looking good.
And that is what we have to be positive about Esteban Ocon in terms of for him coming back, just to round off Renault, is the fact that I think now we're saying is first race looked rusty, second race had to retire, not his fault, third race was his best race of the season in Hungary, and then we've now got to this race and we've gone, that's his best race of the season, so he's improving race on race. He's still not where he needs to be, but he's doing the job for Renault.
Yeah.
And that's his second points finish, isn't it? Because he retired from one race in Hungary, finished outside the points.
Yeah.
Losing out late on to Lando Norris, but that was just for P12 and 13, I think. So irrelevant really on that front. When the car's been there, he's improving, which is positive what he needs to do.
Yeah.
On to McLaren, and Renault and McLaren both brought upgrades this weekend, and it's now the interesting one, because are they both ahead of Racing Point now, or were Racing Point just bad this weekend? Like, I would presume Racing Point would have been hoping that the car that they built had more advantage than 3 races. Definitely.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to tell when there's only one driver for Racing Point, because you have no comparison. Did Stroll have an off day, or was it the car? But yeah, McLaren. But
McLaren themselves, they look like they've made progress in terms of solid race performance from Carlos Sainz, again showing great one-lap pace. Lando Norris getting P5 and Carlos Sainz getting P7 in qualifying. Lando not having a great start and Sainz taking advantage of that, but then pretty much controlled 5th and 6th throughout the race.
Yeah.
They looked fairly comfortable with that. Obviously, Ricciardo getting stuck, but Ricciardo taking advantage of the tyres there and having enough pace to overtake one McLaren. So you can say that fight between McLaren and Renault is fascinating. Actually, they actually look the closest 2 cars on the grid.
Yeah.
In terms of, probably wise because they've got the same power unit. So an aero is a small differentiation. The kind of gaps you can make in aero development seem as the rules of now. I think this is its 3rd year in play, pretty much the same regulations, and it's going to have a 4th year. So yeah, I think it's 2nd and it'll be 3rd year there. So the kind of rate of improvement's always going to be slower, and teams naturally will get closer and closer on the grid as things come. But it's a fascinating battle between them, and it's such a shame for them that Carlos Sainz had that late kind of tyre blowout. But that was, you could argue, good management from Ricciardo meant that he then benefited from it, because he was pushing. You got a radio message from Lando Norris going, Sainz is going to have to start improving his pace, because otherwise Ricciardo's going to be right on the back of me. Then Sainz gets that message, and then he goes, I'm feeling vibrations in my front tyre, but then having to kind of push and can't afford to just manage that, bang, tyre blowout. So you could say Renault forced the mistake. Well, not mistake, but, forced the mechanical failure.
Forced the risk of McLaren pushing.
Yeah, if you push the car into where it's not comfortable being, you reap the rewards for it. So McLaren, a solid weekend, and those upgrades definitely seem to have improved the race pace, I think.
Yeah.
We now move on to Racing Point.
Racing Points. Well, as we've touched on, Stroll, not very good race in P9.
P9.
I always struggle. I always go, how did he finish that poorly? Obviously, his tyres were completely gone at the end. He didn't manage them. They stayed in one piece, which is more than what some drivers could say. But yeah, very disappointing race from Stroll. No Racing Point didn't come out with any excuses. It was just the Stroll's tyres were gone by the end. And was it a bad performance from Stroll, or was it the midfield catching up with Racing Point? Obviously, Nico Hülkenberg had a power issue with his engine, so they couldn't get to start right before the installation lap. So Nico didn't even start on his return. Sad times.
It was the story of the weekend, wasn't it? Perez ruled out due to COVID for testing positive. Nico Hülkenberg makes his return. Very popular driver, obviously, especially on social media. A lot of fans of Nico Hülkenberg and a lot of fans who think that he should be on the F1 grid anyway. But he's got a shot. He's got a chance to kind of put himself in the shop window. Maybe convince someone like a Haas, to kind of put him in the seat for next season. Because he's openly said that he's not done with F1. He wants to still be in Formula One, and this was a great opportunity for him to prove that. And sometimes your luck's not in, is it? P13 wasn't the greatest at qualifying, but qualifying was always going to be tough over the course of a race.
Yeah, Racing Point went on the mediums, and it was a bit,
They asked a lot of him, but the pace maybe naturally wasn't there. But going back to Lance Stroll, Nico was just unlucky, and hopefully, if he does get another opportunity this weekend, he can actually start the race, and it'll be good for him. Because just flying out, that's got to be so demoralising. Just like you're giving everything, bam, all this adaptation, you've gone through all this pain, and then you can't even perform on race day. When all eyes are on you, it was quite cruel. The F1 gods definitely weren't looking down upon Nico favourably, but with Lance, I think maybe the Racing Point pace has dropped off a little bit, but to be beaten by Pierre Gasly,
Tauri,
I think that really shows that it wasn't a great performance from Lance. Whether that just be because he didn't manage his tyres well enough. He took too much out of his tyres because they all pitted at the same time.
It was yet again, he was stuck behind Ricciardo, wasn't it? And I was having flashbacks to the Styria Grand Prix and Stroll being stuck behind Ricciardo, and that probably ruined his tyres, and that's why he lost all the pace at the end. Couldn't make a move on Danny Rick.
And, ultimately that's where Lance is. And an important point to note, actually, watching Ted's notebook, and not many people have picked up or made a big deal about this, but I guess it's, they wait until everything's confirmed. But Ted said that the deal for Vettel is done. And that
he sounded very like they were thinking of announcing it this week, but obviously when Checo tested positive, it seemed like a bit of a iffy move to announce it and go, Checo's positive for COVID, Sebastian's replacing him next season. But maybe in the next couple of weeks, it sounds like we may get an announcement on that.
And if Lance's performances aren't consistently good, he's had one good race in Hungary. The rest have been meh. And the retirement, obviously, in week 1, wasn't it? That his engine packed up on him. it's going to ask serious questions about Racing Point, how competitive they want to be, realistically, because Sergio and Sebastian Vettel looks like it'll be a great partnership at the moment.
It's like a dream pair.
Yeah.
The experience there, you got racing talent there. You got the knowledge of Sebastian, the tenacity of Checo.
But maybe what they're doing at Racing Point is they're giving them the season, because maybe they're announcing the signing of Sebastian Vettel for next year, but not announcing who's going. But and let them fight for the seat like Esteban Ocon and Sergio Perez did, because that was essentially how that happened. They fought for it tooth and nail in the seat because everyone knew that Lance Stroll was coming in. And go from there. But it does seem like the writing's on the wall for Checo at Racing Point, and that's a real shame. And it's a shame because this weekend probably would have been a brilliant weekend for him, because tyre management, Checo is king of tyres.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But Ferrari, we move on, and we've already spoken about one world champion that it's sad to see him in the state that he currently is in Kimi Räikkönen, and former teammates, obviously, Sebastian Vettel. Wasn't happy with the weekend. He won't be happy with the weekend, but wasn't happy with the car all weekend. Struggled with setup to find a setup that he's comfortable with. Struggled to find, the car being in a good place. Had some issues with his kind of brake pedal through the weekend, and we were watching the Channel 4 commentary, and I think Mark Webber said that things are bad in a car or for a driver when he's going in and fiddling with the car himself. I think there was an image, was it qualifying, that he had his hand in the front of the car?
I think it was in practice when his brakes had come loose. His brake pedal had come loose.
Yeah, it was just, and he spoke to Mark off camera apparently and said he's just got no faith in the car to do what he wants it to do, and he's got not no faith in the team, but he's not feeling comfortable in that team environment anymore. And who would? The team have basically said they don't want you anymore by not offering you a contract. So that's got to be a big kick in the teeth, and it's not going to be the best positive place. You're not going to be looking at your garage and going, everyone's behind me, Sebastian Vettel, apart from they don't want me here. So it's tough, and it's tougher for Sebastian, and he's just clearly not falling into his place, where Charles Leclerc is a man of very different fortunes. Ferrari's golden boy, had a good first year in the car last year. He's got some great results this season in a car that's not great. The car is probably, I said somewhere in driver ratings yesterday, it's not as bad as what Sebastian Vettel has, but he's struggling. But it's not as good as what Charles Leclerc's performances on the podium have proven. It's somewhere in the middle of that. It is firmly, I think, in the pack with the McLaren and Renault, probably overall, which makes his podium even more impressive. Obviously he couldn't keep up with Max, but he maintained a gap from Carlos Sainz pretty much all race, and just managed that fourth position, managed, and obviously when Bottas got the tyre blowout, he was able to take full advantage and get a podium again. He's got a P2 and a P3.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
It really is crazy in terms of that. But I suppose you go the other weekend. Actually, Hungary, he got stuffed by strategy, didn't he? And it was only Sebastian Vettel making Ferrari look like idiots by saying, no, we go on the medium compound. That got a good result for him in Hungary. So, you could easily have said that Leclerc maybe would have got that P6 in Hungary if he was on the right strategy. And then you're looking at 2 podiums in there. He's had a fantastic start to the season, I think. Yeah. Absolutely.
But yes.
Ferrari.
Red Bull. Alexander Albon, we touched on the incident I don't think we need to cover it much more. Just a bit more patience, Alex. But he did bring that entertainment factor along with Pierre Gasly at the end. He was one of the few drivers making those moves and not crashing into anyone at the last stage of the race. Yeah, good recovery drive considering he made 2 pit stops because he got that puncture from the McLaren one and then he had to pit again because he just wasn't comfortable on the hards. Good recovery drive. Brought a bit of entertainment to the race. Solid. Still needs to improve build patience. We've already touched on the incident which pretty much put him out of contention of anything notable in this race. So, Max Verstappen did absolutely nothing for the whole race. Not, that sounds quite harsh, but he was miles ahead of the midfield. And
I think he spoke about himself, saying that he needed to entertain himself and had that radio message to his engineer going, have you got your drink? Remember to drink.
He was bored. And then, Bottas, tyre blowout, second in the bag. We're feeling some vibrations. Let's change to new tyres and race over. Last lap, no drive. Lewis Hamilton's got a puncture. Max, drive! And then, but it just wasn't enough. Everyone was on the edge of the seats. So close. But it just wasn't enough. Too much of a gap for Max to close Lewis on that final lap. And it would have been a memorable win, but probably undeserved because Mercedes had dominated. But solid drive from Max. Capitalised on second, nearly got first.
Well, I think this is what Max is doing everything that he possibly can. And just looking at his results, I have no doubt in my mind that if he hadn't had that engine, whatever it was electrical failure, was it in Austria, that it just kind of died on him when they changed an engine mode, he would have won that race. And then we're still seeing Mercedes' clear advantage. But if Max wins Austria, we're talking about him, he's won Austria. He's then come P3 in the Styrian GP, P2 in Hungary, and he's now just come P2 in Silverstone Race 1. I mean, even going DNF, in the races that he's finishing P3, P2, P2, considering how good that Mercedes is, yes, he's benefited from the tyres in this race, but he's genuinely pushed the cars. But then, obviously, Valtteri Bottas benefited in the Styrian GP when he had that damage to his front wing.
Exactly, yeah.
Would he have been able to hang on? Because it massively affected, I think, his performance in that one. And Valtteri and his tyres, it might have still been the case that Valtteri got P2 in Styria. But, he's given everything. And I think, it's not I think. Easy money is Mercedes have got both titles wrapped up. Lewis is 7 times world champion and Mercedes have won their 7th Constructors title in a row, which would be a new record.
Yeah. But if anyone's going to stop it, it's going to be Max.
I can see Max finishing P2 in the championship.
Yeah.
If he keeps doing what he's doing. And just as an interesting thought, because the cars are frozen and they're only going to be developments of this car, what we're seeing in 2021, Red Bull aren't going to win the Constructors because Alex Albon isn't going to be ready enough to... He's not doing what a number 2 driver needs to do at Red Bull. But in Max Verstappen at the front, and Red Bull's history of developing a car and having a very good car come the end of the season, well, if they have a very good car come the end of the season and then it actually starts the 2021 season...
They may have a good car to start the season.
You wouldn't rule out Max Verstappen maybe having a title shot, but this is me being an optimistic fan going, please,
someone challenge it.
Someone challenge Mercedes seriously. And that's the only kind of straws I'm clutching at in the hope of, something playing out. But it can't be understated how impressive Max Verstappen has been this year.
I'm not going to say anything. I don't have to.
But we move on to Mercedes. And Mercedes again seemed to, they were 0.7, I think I saw a tweet from Aldas going on this, that they were 0.7 seconds faster round Silverstone than they were last year. Red Bull were 0.1 seconds slower and Ferrari were 0.3 seconds slower.
Jeez.
It just shows kind of where Mercedes are and why they had such an advantage all weekend. But tyres, Lewis Hamilton, another great weekend in terms of qualifying, set 2 laps, even though he made a mistake in Q2. When it matters, he delivers, put 2 laps in that were good enough to take pole position. Then in the race, Valtteri he's in his pocket.
Yep.
He's so far down in his pocket. Lewis just kind of looks at him, probably smiles at Valtteri, gives him... It must be horrible for Valtteri because he's coming up against one of the greatest of all time, and Valtteri's performances actually aren't too bad. Again, my fault with Valtteri is that going through traffic or competing, but I think a key moment we have to talk about in the race is turn 1, and I don't think...
The title.
That was it for me. That was just the mentality. If you put Nico Rosberg in that car, it may have been risky, but he would have wanted to go wheel to wheel.
Yeah.
Where Bottas just kind of backed and let Hamilton go through, and then he never got close to him at another point in the Grand Prix.
No.
Even on safety car restarts, Lewis was just off into the distance. Valtteri just kind of seems to have accepted it.
He was always there. It's like, Lewis.
But he wasn't.
He was within 2 seconds. He's always there.
And Lewis said that it was, he had to push his tyres because of, how much there. But, then you look at the time gap to Red Bull, it was like being maintained at 10 seconds. And, Christian Horner was saying that they'd clearly backed off and were just being able to manage the race out front. And that's why he was actually quite surprised that they had the tyre failures, in terms of it. But it just... this is where I get disappointed in Valtteri. A weekend like this, would Nico Rosberg have risked potentially coming together going into turn 1 because he knew if he got ahead of turn 1, Lewis might come back at him in the race, but he's ahead of him at some point.
Yeah.
And Lewis would have to pass him, and then he can make his life difficult. And that's the difference between Nico Rosberg and Valtteri Bottas for me. Valtteri Bottas just concedes the mental battle too easily, and he's never going to beat Lewis Hamilton like that. No. And it makes it a shame because as much as it's brilliant to watch Lewis Hamilton doing what he's doing, and it is brilliant doing that, you want to see him pushed and you want to see him challenged. And that second Mercedes seat is just so wasted at the moment.
Yeah, I said in the preview that Bottas had to win this race to maintain that title fight, and he's gone and scored no points. He hasn't not just not won, he scored 0 points. No fault of his own. Second still would have been a bad result for him, but scored no points. Title was done.
Here's a curveball for you in terms of it. Valtteri Bottas, although expected to sign for Mercedes, hasn't technically had a new contract. Do Mercedes go, their car is so far front that they just go, screw it, we've got the records, we've got 100% wins this season, because I think it's, there you go, let's put Max and Lewis in a car next to each other and just see the fireworks come off, because Max definitely has a performance clause in that Red Bull contract. So
it's probably not going to be matched this season, so
would it be? I doubt it would, but I doubt Mercedes would do that. But
for Mercedes, it's a dream partnership, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean they're winning everything.
You can't win 2 drivers' championships, so why does Bottas need to challenge from their perspective? he does enough to get the constructors. So,
as fans, though, it's so disheartening to see, because you want to see battles for race leads. You want to see battles for kind of championships. The midfield battles are brilliant. It's enjoying it, but we've just had to accept it, that's where our action and excitement's going to come from, because Mercedes have been so good and Red Bull and Ferrari haven't found a way to match them. And their number 2 driver, since Nico Rosberg left, has just been a very good and a very talented driver, but someone who's never going to match Lewis Hamilton.
The support act.
Absolutely. But that
sounds very harsh on that.
It does, but unfortunately, that's
the truth hurts sometimes.
It's truth, but that is our kind of review of the teams from this weekend's race at Silverstone. We now go on to our kind of little feeder review, and the feature races were both won by not new race winners. Liam Lawson won his first feature race. He's won a sprint race this season, finished actually behind the safety car and 3 Prema boys. The Prema boys are very interesting. Oscar Piastri looked close, was fighting in maybe with a safety car, which obviously, first of all, we have to go, thankfully, Ollie Caldwell is okay, because that was a really nasty accident with him and Dunner. Going into the back and just literally ripped the back of the car.
Back of this car, yeah.
That was horrible to see, but luckily he was okay. But then obviously led to the safety car. And there were quite a few incidents. There was Bent Viskel came together and then with someone spun into the path of Jack Doohan, and they went out. There was some quite nasty incidents in the F3 feature race that didn't work out. But Liam Lawson managed to kind of take the lead early doors and never really looked back from that moment on. And it was a good for the New Zealand driver. He's got to compete this year to kind of get a promotion. Well, if he does enough, he has technically enough super license points to make it into the Alfa Tauri seat next year. So
fair enough.
It's crazy on that front. Stranger things have happened, but it'd be interesting. The Red Bull Juniors are hardly screaming for the seat in Tsunoda and Druva, although Tsunoda had a decent weekend this one and was taken out. He was taken out by Callum Ilott, I think, who received a 5-second penalty for that. The F2 feature race was won by Nikita Mazepin, and it's quite funny actually. High Tech, their first season in F2, they've done well in F3. Obviously, well, it was back-to-back wins for High Tech because Liam Lawson drives for High Tech in F3. But yeah, it was a good drive from Nikita Mazepin, but I think it was the highlight of this race was Guan Yu Zhao. Went long, really long on the first stint, and I think it was like a last 8-lap sprint on the medium compound, and just managed to get past everyone.
Yeah, I think wasn't he in P8 and with not many laps to go?
Yeah, and somehow managed to finish second. And Christian Lundgaard tyres dropped towards the end, which meant that Louis Delatraz got onto the podium as well, so positive for there. Onto the sprint races themselves, and the F3 sprint race was won by Schmoyler, but we spoke about it in the F1 review with dangerous driving, moving through the braking zones. This was just kind of Schmoyler zigzagging from side to side, trying to break the DRS or the kind of slipstream, which, it's a good move defensively, but because moving all over the place, it becomes difficult to follow and dangerous driving in terms of that aspect. So he was retrospectively penalised, and I think it dropped him to 6th, which I think meant that Beckman got promoted to win the victory. And then the F2 sprint race was won by the young Brit Dan Ticktum. A fantastic result for the British driver, and it really shows the redemption arc that Dan Ticktum's going on. We forget sometimes that these guys are young kids, and he's made mistakes. There is no doubt about that, but he's taken responsibility for that. He knew he needed to improve. He knew this is last shot saloon for him with this opportunity in F2 with Dams to be able to give him an opportunity into Formula 1. And he's won a sprint race, and he's had a very good kind of start to the season, actually. And it was a really good kind of performance from Dan, and it was great to see, actually. Really good there. But funnily enough, the Prema boys, the championship leader Schwartzman, had a poor weekend. It never really materialised in that front. And all you spoke about earlier, obviously Giovinazzi, Raikkonen under pressure from the Ferrari juniors. Ilott had the pace, it didn't materialise. Mick Schumacher never really kind of got the pace, had the beating of Schwartzman all weekend, but couldn't capitalise from the good positions that he was in. And Schwartzman just was a bit nowhere all weekend, really, which was a shame for them. But
still has that championship lead there.
He does. But I think probably performance of the weekend, wow, what do you say? Probably Dan Ticktum in the sprint race for a winner of F2, but overall driver of the weekend was probably Renault Junior Christian Lundgaard, finishing 4th in the feature race and 2nd. He had a late charge, pitting under safety car in the sprint race to manage to get P2 in that. He pitted from P2 and then tried to kind of get an advantage to see if he can overtake Dan, but wasn't possible in the end. But yeah, Lundgaard had a very strong performance, and I believe that was good enough to take him to the lead of the championship. So interesting that. Check me on that one if I'm wrong. But another fantastic weekend in the feeder series. But back to F1. We now go to driver of the day. Obviously, you saw our driver ratings. There were 2 drivers we gave 10 out of 10. But driver of the day, who was your driver of the day, Stephen?
I'm going to go for... I think... I'm not sure. I'm going to go for Charles Leclerc. I was debating Lewis Hamilton, but just because he finished the race on 3 wheels, that he didn't have to do much, whereas Charles had to drag that Ferrari to the podium yet again. So Leclerc gets my driver of the day.
For me, it's the same. Daniel Ricciardo was up there. I think it was a superb performance in the Renault, narrowly missing out. And Pierre Gasly, again, had a brilliant race, I thought. Really positive performance from him. Max Verstappen, again, brilliant race for him, but I guess probably standards are so high for it. Lewis Hamilton, like I said, it has to come in consideration, but Charles Leclerc, I just think it was an incredible performance where that Ferrari is. Like we said, we think it's somewhere in the middle of the kind of McLarens and Renaults, and I don't think the performance is really given enough credit as deserves, because we go, a Ferrari's on the podium, and we're just so in autopilot that Ferraris are meant to be there.
Yeah.
Well, this Ferrari isn't meant to be there, and Charles Leclerc is still somehow getting it there. And it was...
It's just like a McLaren or a Renault grabbing a podium. That's what you got to think about. And if they grab a podium, probably give them driver of the day. So, yeah, Charles.
Absolutely. It was a brilliant drive from the Monegasque driver. And that's driver of the day. It'd be interesting, actually, now. We're rounding off race rating. What would you give the race rating?
This is a difficult one. What did we give Hungary?
We gave Hungary a 7, I think. I think we gave both Hungary and Styria a 7.
It's difficult because the last lap is probably one of the craziest closing stages of an F1 race in recent memory. I'm going to give it a 7. Yeah, I can't give it any higher because we had about 30, 40 laps of nothing, of DRS train and nothing.
I think, having calmed down from the excitement of the last race, obviously it's amazing seeing the kind of last laps how it did, and tyre blowouts, and it was fascinating that. But I think I'm going to go low. I think it's been the worst Grand Prix that we've had, because we still Hungary. We still had some brilliant on-track battles in terms of everything was fighting there. We had Valtteri Bottas chasing Max Verstappen down at the end, and fantastic there. And Styria, we had that drag race at the end there, and we had the charge of Sergio Perez through the race. Austria was just... Austria was brilliant. The birth of Last Lap Lando. So this one, the safety car, it's not his fault, but the safety car basically ruined the race as a contest, because it took strategy out.
The first one was fine, because that didn't affect anything. The safety car, everyone went on the same strategy. No difference. No undercut, overcut, different tyres. 2-stop, 1-stop. No, it was just 1-stop hards, that's the race.
Yeah, and
DRS tree.
The tyre blowouts did make it an exciting end, and it did spice things up. And obviously it spiced things up with the podium, and obviously where people were finishing and everything. And there was some good action from Pierre Gasly, and like we said, Alex Albon charging late through the race. I think it's a 6 out of 10 for me, just because there was such that long sustained period of staleness. Everything pretty much stayed the same, other than Grosjean in the middle, which isn't the type of action that you want to be seeing in the middle of a Grand Prix. But that is another race review podcast, guys. We hope you've enjoyed it. It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts from the race. What you thought, what was your race rating, what was your drive for the day, what was your kind of standout feeder performances from that, and how did you think each team, how did your favourite drivers do, how did your favourite teams do from the weekend, what were your thoughts from it as a whole? And if you're new around here, or you haven't done so already, and you're confused how to say the word subscribe, what can they do, Stephen?
They can like, they can subscribe, and they can ding that bell.
So that's how you say it. I was confused. If you're wondering why I'm making an emphasis on this, go and watch yesterday's driver ratings, and was it the preview as well last week?
It's every episode.
I just can't. I can't say the word.
That time, I nailed it.
You did. You did. When the pressure was on.
How was that? How's that?
Yeah, Kevin Magnussen. That one's for you, Casey, on there. But yes, please, guys, if you do drop us a thumbs up and subscribe, massively appreciated on that. We do appreciate the support you show us. But that's it from us today, guys. Join us tomorrow for F1 Fantasy Weekly. We'll look forward to kind of seeing you there. So for now, you F1 fans, keep racing.